I'm Angela Paiva, mix and recording engineer, currently chair of the AES New York Section, and I'd like to welcome everyone today and thank you for attending. We have a great panel with guests Jack Douglas, Easy AD, and Jon Fausty, moderated by Lenise Bent. I know they will have some amazing insight, maybe some great stories to share with us. So let's get started. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Lenise Bent. Producer engineer Lenise Bent is one of the first women audio engineers, honed her skills on many iconic records, including Asia by Steely Dan, Breakfast in America by Supertramp. She is also the first woman engineer to receive a platinum album for Blondie's Auto-American, which includes The Tide is High, the very first hit rap song with original music, Rapture. She's also a post-production, sound, Foley editor, and mixer. Foreign dubbing supervisor for several animated features, including DreamWorks, Shrek, and Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron, an audio archivist, instructor, and consultant for singer-songwriters. She's a longstanding member of NARIS, the producer and engineers wing of the Recording Academy, Sound Girls, and of course, the Audio Engineering Society. I also want to mention Lenise's work on Blondie's Auto-American record, specifically Rapture, a song that became a classic. Rapture was the first music video with a rap aired on MTV, and Run DMC's Rock Box was the first hip-hop music video by a rap group aired on MTV. MTV launched on August 1st, 1981. A year after the Sugar Hill Gang released Rapper's Delight in 1979, Blondie recorded Rapture, the first major hip-hop hit to use original music rather than sampling other artists' beats. Released on Blondie's Auto-American album in late 1980, the single, co-written by Debbie Harry and Chris Stein, reached #1 in early 1981 on Billboard's pop and dance charts. Interesting to note is that Fab Five Freddy, who is also immortalized in Rapture by Blondie, was one of the connectors that bridged the scene between the New York uptown graffiti and early rap scene and the downtown club art and punk music scenes. So welcome, Lenise.
Well, hi there. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I learned more about Rapture right then than I knew before. I appreciate that. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm just delighted to be here today, and thank you for joining us for this very special panel on the New York music scene and cultural scene back in the 70s and early 80s. I would like to thank our hosts, Angela Paiva, thank you, Rory Shamir, Jean Montalvo, and the New York section of the Audio Engineering Society. Thank you so much for having us and doing this wonderful panel. We've been having such a great time, all of us, researching for this, and it's just been fascinating. Because something powerful was going on in New York during that time. It was vibrant, it was raucous, it was upscale and down and dirty all at the same time. And what was that? There was so many different genres of music. There was hip hop, there was punk, there was glam rock, there was disco, there was Latin, of course, jazz and rock and folk. Everything was there, classical, of course. But we're going to kind of focus on the genres of music that our great panelists here were paramount in working with and being a part of, which would be pretty much the hip hop, punk, glam rock, almost all of those, Latin for sure, and the interaction between all of these genres, but how they developed and how powerful and how they influenced the culture, the clubs, the fashion, the dance. The entire culture was a reflection of the energy and attitude happening all over the city at that time. So what was going on? Well, our illustrious panelists are here to share their personal takes and explore what they were up to during this vibrant time. Allow me to introduce to you Jon Fausty. Jon is an award-winning master recording engineer producer with a career that spans 52 years of professional experience. It was during 1972 that he began working with various stars from the world of Latin music, becoming the go-to engineer for some of Latin music's biggest stars, including Ray Barretto, Tito Puente, the Fania All-Stars, and Johnny Pacheco, as well as establishing long-term relationships with Willie Colon and Ruben Blades, or Blades. Throughout his career, he has also worked with such prolific artists such as Los Van Van, Eddie Palmieri, David Byrne, Chucho Valdez, Mongo Santamaria, George Benson, Celia Cruz, The Platters, Wilson Pickett, the Brecker Brothers, Steve Gadd, and many, many more. Welcome, Jon. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon.
Next up, I would love to introduce to you Easy AD. As an original member of the legendary Cold Crush Brothers Supreme, Easy AD is a trailblazing pioneer of hip hop and an MC with countless awards and performances in diverse venues, domestic and abroad. With a high-selling single, Punk Rock Rap, AD and the Cold Crush Brothers were the first to combine hip hop and rock, breaking the color barrier in hip hop, providing the first opportunity for collaboration between an independent label and major company. Their most successful hit, Fresh, Wild, Fly, and Bold, was released in 1984, and they were also featured in the first hip hop movie ever made, Wild Style. Today, AD continues to preserve the history and culture of hip hop through several business ventures, as well as mentoring young people molding the next generations of hip hop. Some of these include being the education director for the nonprofit Hip Hop Public Health, the research coordinator for the Columbia Neurological Institute, hip hop health ambassador for Harlem Hospital, hip hop. Oh gosh, hang on one sec. Pardon me. Hip hop historian for the Apollo Theater Oral History Project. I think that is fascinating. And a celebrity tour guide for the hip hop hush tours throughout New York City, which I will be taking next time I get there. And as a keynote speaker and lecturer for colleges and universities throughout the United States and abroad. Welcome, Easy. Thank you for being here.
It's my honor to be among so many distinguished individuals who have did so much for music in New York City and around the world, closely connecting everything from Latin, jazz. I mean, Jon has worked with some of the people that I love, some people I've met in my lifetime, but I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to be a pioneer. I'm honored to be actually in the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C.
All right. All right. Excellent. Congratulations. Next up, we have Jack Douglas, a dear friend, and I'm just so happy that we get to be on a panel together, and this time he gets to talk, not me. Jack is a Grammy-winning engineer, producer, musician, and composer, producing albums for major artists, including Aerosmith, John Lennon, Cheap Trick, Patti Smith, and many others. He has created string arrangements for Ringo Starr and Paul McCartney and has engineered for George Harrison. So you've got the whole Beatles down. Lucky you. David Bowie, and more. Early on, he has signed as an artist by major labels and was also a sideman for many groups. Oh, that just doesn't say anything about you, Jack, just like tiny little bit. No. But so happy to have you here and to be on a panel with you again and to meet these wonderful gentlemen, Jon and Easy. And so each one of our panelists has quite the extensive stellar history, and I suggest you check them out online to learn more about their individual expertise and accomplishments, because they are vast, and you'll love finding out about it. So let's start with what each of you were up to during the early to mid 70s or so. I think I'm going to start with Jack. What were you up to?
Well, I had just was coming off, actually in 1969, I did my last record as an artist, which was produced by the Isley Brothers. And
Wow.
and so I was then making this record for the Isley Brothers as an artist, and I didn't like the mix, and so I said something about the mix, and they got really mad at me, and they told me to mix it myself. This was at A&R Studios,
Ah, okay.
Phil
Cool.
Ramon's place, and
Mhm.
so they let me mix it. I was like public enemy number one to the engineer there. I just did terrible things. I'd never really. I mean, I'd been a musician and a sideman and an artist all through the '60s. So actually, I started my career as a campaign songwriter for Robert Kennedy. So
Oh,
I'd
wow.
been doing the bouncing around a lot of different things for a while. Anyway, I just let the engineer do his thing, and I got out of his way. And I decided that right then and there that I wanted to get on the other side of the board. I asked him for a job, and he said that he wouldn't let me anywhere within 2 blocks of any studio. And he told me that maybe I could wreck another studio that was opening up a few blocks down the street, which was Record Plant. They were rebuilding it. And so he told me to go down there. This was '69. And I went down there and I walked in and Paul Prestopino, who was the head of maintenance at that time, was in the receptionist booth when I walked in. I said, I need a job. And he said, we need a janitor. And I got the job as a janitor. My first gig there was carrying tapes out of a truck that was coming from that was recording Woodstock and carrying the tapes into the studios where the artists were doing their overdubs and fixing things. And so I think the first person I ran into was Jimi Hendrix, who offered me a joint. And I thought, if I smoke this, I will be destroyed the rest of the day. But I knew right then and there that I was in the right place. And that's kind of where it started. I got my feet, firmly into the studio, and in fact, pretty much lived there. So
Oh,
I was
wow.
a janitor and a general worker from the summer of '69, and then I became a tape librarian, and into the '70s. By the '70s, early '70s, I was cutting 4-track demos for people like Billy Joel and assisting on a lot of dates, with Jay Messina and Shelly Atkins and Royce Acala. So that's the early start of it for me.
Oh, wow. And so what did you do in your free time? What was New York like for you back then?
Well, in the '60s, to carry us to the '70s, there was this uptown and downtown scene. Like you had downtown, you had the Night Owl, and
Mhm.
places like that. You had the Lovin' Spoonful, the Blues Magoos, and then
Mhm.
uptown you had places like Ungano's, the Rolling Stone, where the Vagrants played, which became Leslie West
Mhm.
and Mountain, and also you had on the cusp of disco. You had places like Ondine's. Strangely enough, the house band for one whole summer at Ondine's was the Doors, who were very
Oh,
much
wow.
not danceable. Uh,
Mhm.
but the Chambers Brothers was the regular that you could dance to. So there was kind of an uptown dance scene, and then there was a downtown like sit and listen scene,
Mhm.
which and the downtown scene started to turn into this kind of kids coming in off the street. Um, and it wasn't long after that you had Max's. So I was hanging out at Max's Kansas City for the most part. I lived on Fifth Street between A and B, so it was a short walk up to Max's, and that's where it started to happen. Also at the Mercer Arts Center, where there started to be a buzz about kids who had just picked up guitars and started playing, even though they didn't know how to play them.
Mhm.
But it was the sound was cool. That's kind of, I mean, I spent most of my time in the studio, but when I was out, that's where I was. I was a regular at Max's.
Cool. Cool. So, how about you, Easy? Where were you, 70s, early 80s? What were you up to? And and your mic's there. We go.
Well, yeah. What
Tell
was
me
up?
about you.
First of all, I was in 1969. I think I was like 6 years old. So,
Yeah.
but honestly, like, so in the early 70s, I started doing hip hop in 1976. I started writing rhymes, and the music that was played in my house was like Donna Summers, Isaac Hayes,
Mhm.
and people like and Al Green, and we used to listen to WCBS in the morning when we get up in the morning. So we had that genre of music. But in our schools at the time, we played instruments. I played I played trumpet. I played drums. I played bongos and congos. So I learned how to write rhymes. So in 1977, there was a blackout, right? So the year was a blackout. So that's when a lot of people got into, a lot of DJs became prominent in the Bronx. Like, so hip hop began in the Bronx, all right? So the reason why hip hop began is because we didn't really connect, the younger generation didn't really connect to the music as far as like wanting to do it, right? So we brought out our turntables, our speakers, in the parks, and we started doing live parties in the park, which brought tens and thousands of people in the park. And at that time, we did not have to get a permit. We didn't have to get noise permit, sound permit. We just plug everything into the electrical pole, and we played our music. So some of the prominent songs that kicked off, like all the things that Jon said, like the music and the artists that he spoke about, we played their beats, right? We may have rhymed over those particular beats, like stuff like that. But we played like Apache, Bob James, and when Run DMC and them produced Aerosmith, that we was rocking off that way before that was presented to the world. All right, so let's go back to the beginning of hip hop. Hip hop was just a genre of music that brought people together. Four elements of the hip hop was graffiti, which you introduced when you talk about Fat Five Freddy. He was an artist, a graffiti artist, and breakdancing, which most of the people did not really take kindly to breakdancing. They thought the kids were out of there insane. But remember, when you're young, you're on the cusp of doing whatever you want to do. There's nothing every time the adults tell you not to do, you're going to do it even more.
Oh yeah, you're immortal and bulletproof.
Exactly. Then you had the DJ, which brought the rhythm and the beats, and then the MC, which talked about the narratives that was happening in our community. Now, when we went out to school, the Bronx was considered, it was burning down. We didn't consider it being burning down. We thought it was, it was a beautiful place to live. Our schools are beautiful, and we had a music that was ours. And so we were in the studios at the time. So hip hop, we passed our music on through tapes, cassette tapes. Well, first of all, we made 8-track tapes to be distributed around all the 5 boroughs. Then we went from 8-track tapes to cassette tapes. Now, I can honestly say this: the Cochran brothers have gone platinum at least 10 times on the cassette tapes, which of course that's not documented. This is before records. This is before Sugar Hill Gang and all that. And then we one of the things about the Cochran brothers, we took like popular pop songs like Harry Chapin, Cats in the Cradle, and we did rhymes.
Gilbert O'Sullivan, you guys did too.
That's right.
That cracked me up.
Right, exactly. We took that and we did rhymes, and like people were like amazed how we incorporated that. This is all before records. We did a rhyme called "Other MCs Can't Deal with Us Because We Are the Known as the Cold Crush, Putting Fellas on the Jock, Making Fly Girls Blush." And then we use Billy Joe 52nd Street, the Cold Crush, the Cold Crush. So we incorporated that. So that put us on a whole nother level. Then records was being made. We didn't want to make records. We like live performances. So we mastered the live performances. And to this day, we still like prominent in that world. So we did music, DJing, we did our own parties, our own promotion. We went
Wow.
record shopping, which was exciting. The
Mm.
blackout created new DJs with mismatch things,
Ta-da!
and
Like
then
magic.
we made punk rock rap.
Ah, your big hit. Yeah.
Yeah, punk rock rap brought the downtown uptown, and we fused it together, and we made punk rock rap. And then we were on a subsidiary label of CBS, and they didn't know that we were brown until they met us in person. And they was like, well, how do we promote these guys? They're brown, using that music. But again, when you're making music, music has no color.
That's right.
Music infiltrates every culture. It's just, so that's what it was, hip hop. And then they released Rappers Delight, which we would consider Rappers Delight and the artists at that particular time the Milli Vanilli of the hip hop culture, because they were not involved in the culture of hip hop before, at that time. So they kind of put us backwards as far as the lyrics and the flow and all that, because we already went past that way of emceeing and rhyming. So in retrospect, we became ahead of our time because they put hip hop to the masses back because of that record. Interesting.
Wow. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Wow. We'll get back to more of that. I want to check in here with Jon, because Jon, he has, the longest career out of everybody. And I'm just fascinated by that, and that you're still doing it. I'm delighted. And I want to hear what was going on with you, especially in one of your interviews. You mentioned that your first session recording Latin music, here you are eventually to be the premier Latin engineer for everybody that mattered. And your first session, you said, was a horrible disaster.
Oh, it was horrible.
Why was that? And what has changed since then? What did you learn? And also tell us about who you were and how you got into that position, and what the 70s in New York were like for you then, either in the studio as well as your lifestyle.
The first session that you referred to was the Sesto All Stars. And I was working at a studio called Groove Sound Studios, part of Musical Records. And Al Santiago, who was a major figure in Latin music in those days, brought in this band. And I had never recorded or heard timbales or bells, I knew what congas were. And just recording this band was, I considered a disaster, because the sounds were all wrong. The bells were too loud, the brass was all distorted, and it was, it wasn't worth talking about, let's put it that way. That was in 1968.
Do you remember how you mic'd it, or why it was such
probably the big reason why it sounded so bad, because I had no knowledge of how to mic any of that stuff, especially the timbales. It's two drums with a bell in the middle and a cymbal, and it just, the balance was all off. It's embarrassing how bad it sounded. and so that was 1968. I have a list here of a few titles. And moving on, that was at Groove Sound Studios. After a short period of time at Delta recording on Broadway, I couldn't stand it there anymore, because it was all commercials and wasn't recording any music that I liked at all. I got approached by Larry Harlow, and at Delta we were doing a jam session with Elliot Randall and a few other prime players, and Larry Harlow said, "Oh, look, we're going to start a studio on at 1440 Broadway called Good Vibration." come up and why don't you audition to be an engineer there? And I did that. And I think it was something like 50 guys came in to do a mix on the fly, and I got the gig. So at Good Vibrations was the studio where all of Fania was being recorded, all the artists of Fania.
Wow.
For example, in 1973, I recorded Willie Colon's album Lo Mato and Calla Luna Calla. So, you know, that song, you probably don't know it, but it was a very big hit on the radio. And then in 73, I also recorded a jazz record called The Other Road, Ray Barretto. And that was an amazing album. 3 trumpets and drums. Let's see, who was the drummer? I can't remember his name. That's that was one of the first jazz albums I recorded. And right after that, and also in 1973, Ray Barretto's Indestructible record. And the idea of that record was his band broke up and they all went on to form this band called Typica 73. So Ray answered with the album Indestructible, which means, of course, you know, you could take my band, but you can't, you know, destroy me. I'm indestructible.
Well, tell me about your miking. I'm fascinated still. Can't help but go back as an engineer myself. I want to know, you know, how did you become this premier Latin recording engineer, star engineer? What were your techniques? Can you share any of those with us?
Yeah, sure, I can. And the key to that, the answer to that question was I had to invent miking techniques, because the techniques that existed for Latin music, being congas, timbal, and bongo, piano, bass, and brass, I mean, it was just the engineers really that were doing that didn't really have a clue on how it was supposed to sound. And it was my job and my pleasure to design recording techniques for Latin bands.
Yeah, specifically for that. What kind of mics did you use? What were your placement?
Whatever you at Good Vibrations, we had a lot of nice Neumanns tube mics, U47s, U48s, U87s.
You have a 67?
67s, a few of them, yeah.
KM84s?
KM84s and also Sheps, small diaphragm condenser mics. And of course, a lot of dynamic mics, 421s, 441s. And the idea was to integrate these great microphones with Latin sound, and of course there was some problems with levels and distortion, so we had to adjust the microphone placement to be able to, there's Tito, to be able to record these sounds, the congas, bongo, and timbales.
Now, did you have the bands all, everybody in the same room? Did you use much isolation?
We used some isolation, but for the most part, everybody recorded together.
Okay.
What kind of board was in there?
At the first console, there was a modified Audio Designs.
Was it a tube board or a solid state?
No, not that early. It was solid state, and it was kind of small. I think we had 32 channels.
How many buses did you have to work with?
16,
oh.
And it was a 16 channel recorder that we started out with, the 16 channel Scully.
Oh.
You know,
Scully, okay.
Scully with the playback head and the record head being the same. So of course it was just a 2-head machine, a race head and a record playback head, and that was saved on the cost of the machine a little bit. When we finally went to 24 track, we got an MCI, which was good.
Cool.
So the idea, as I started to say, the recording of these instruments, because they're so different than the American genre, I had to really get into the sound of each instrument. And I'll give you an example. The congas, you would see engineers putting just two mics over, one over the low drum, one over the high drum. And I decided, well, gee, all this sound is coming out of the bottom of the conga drums, the bass sound, the sound of the palm hitting the skin. And by adding that third mic, I was able to capture the real sound of the conga drum.
Did you have the congas on just on like a wood surface, or was it so there was no rug underneath them?
No,
okay.
No. And
cool.
If there was
good to
rug,
know.
If there was a rug, we'd have to put a sheet of plywood or something under it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have any resonance.
Right. That's what you'd want. Well, I'd like to ask Jack now a little bit about the New York Dolls.
Oh,
what was that like to be recording them, and who else? What other bands? I mean, that is just like so out of nowhere, that band. And tell us about that and your experience.
Before I do, I just wanted to say that my son has been nominated twice for Latin Grammys. For Latin jazz, he plays with Wayne Wallace Quintet.
Oh, awesome!
He's plays
trombone player.
Yeah, great trombone player. So he's been twice for the Grammy nods.
And what does your son play?
He plays trap drums. He's a Latin drummer. He's pretty well known. But more recently, he's been playing percussion with Aerosmith in Las Vegas in the residency, so that's fun. And because both my sons grew up around the studio, they decided that that my music was definitely not for them. And the one boy went into Latin jazz, and my other son is a hip hop guy. And runs a production company with No ID. I don't know if you guys know who he is, but they have done a lot of Kanye and Drake and Jay-Z records, and so I get to watch both of those guys at work in two fields I know very little about, although I feel somewhat responsible for the Bronx scene, being from the Bronx myself, in that I did I produced Walk This Way and the original boom back boom boom back went a long way.
Yeah,
and we kind of knew that what was going on in the Bronx with that record. With them just playing that beat, we thought it was so cool. But anyway, the New York Dolls.
Well, just shifting over, I mean, such distinct genres, such distinct styles going on, and all so powerful. The glam punk, glam rock, punk, all of that. I'm gonna guess that you're probably the one who had your finger on more of that pulse, but maybe Jon and Easy can share some too.
I did. I hung out at Max's. I was friends with Patti Smith and Lou Reed and saw the Dolls on any number of occasions at both the Mercer Art Center and at the Max's. And when they got their deal, and I also hung out with them. So when they got their deal, that picture, by the way, that you showed, that was me working on Alice Cooper, but in Studio C as in the data mix board. But
wow.
When they got the deal, they Mercury Records wanted a producer of some renown, so they got Todd Rundgren to produce it. Yes, that's a lot of cigarettes in that.
Yeah.
And that's my early, I think it was an Ace rhythm machine that I used to give people click track. It's just a simple beat.
They had one of those consoles down at Electric Lady too.
Yeah, they were cool.
Yeah.
And so you know, Todd was not the guys that typically the producer that was a good match for the dolls that were just raw. And so having, knowing the guys and having a real feel for, the kind of thing that they were doing, I got the engineering gig. And, those were really wild sessions. A few members of the band were in a different zone. Johnny Thunders was, God bless him. He was absolutely dangerous on guitar. You never knew what he was going to play. You kind of knew the songs, but Todd said to me at one point, they're kind of awful. I don't know what band that is. It's not the Dolls. That's David. David just spent a week with me in Montauk. He didn't. It was like they can't play. It was he thought they were not that good. Well, they weren't great musicians. But what I pointed out, and I think what was so important about the scene then, very much like what we were saying about what you were saying about the rap scene, is that there was a feel, there was a movement. So when they got together and they made a noise that was very cool.
Yeah,
that's what it was about. Not were they individually great drummers, and David Johansen was a really wonderful lyricist. He had lyrics that came off of the streets and off the Lower East Side. Trash, pick it up.
Yeah, don't take your love away.
Yeah, it was.
I saw them live at the Troubadour, and that little tiny stage, and with them all crammed up there, and with all their gear and just flamboyance, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, they were punk, but they were also glam. They were wearing high heels and makeup, and a frequent guest at our sessions was David Bowie and a few other early who were really curious about what was going on, what we were doing, and they would hang out and watch these sessions go down. So it was a bit revolutionary. There was already a scene happening in Detroit, MC5. But they were actually better players.
Yeah. Iggy Pop.
Iggy came with David to the studio.
Yeah.
To see the Dolls. It was, yes.
Well, I was just going to say there were the Ramones,
but the Ramones came later.
They came later. Okay.
Yeah. The funny thing was, when CBGB's was closing, they had all these guest players came in. Patty played the Ramones. What was left played, and television, and everybody came in and did did a night before the place closed. And of course they had the Dolls come in and play. And David said to me, this is the first time we ever played CBGB's, because we were so many years ahead of that CBGB scene. Our scene was Max's. And
they were at Max's Kansas City.
That was their home, and the Mercer Art Center, and then the Road.
Okay.
I tried to do, there they are, I tried to do justice to the trashy sound that they had. It was, I wasn't going to make it sound clean and smooth and polished, and I did my best to make it what it was, and I many years later got to produce their comeback.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, Easy, talking about sound quality and all of that, I have to say that listening to all this hip hop that I've been listening to, I have to say for the first time, just really impressed with the sound quality and the recording quality. Really wondered, do you have anything to share regarding the recording of the Crush Brothers and
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Tito Puente, his manager, Joey Conzo Sr. Um, I know him really well because his son, Joe Conzo Jr., was our personal photographer for the Cocos Brothers. So I got a chance to meet a lot of the Latin artists growing up in the culture of hip hop. But as far as engineers concerned, like, so remember when we went into the studios, the engineers were not familiar with what we were doing, right? So
right.
they weren't familiar with, with hip hop. They wasn't familiar with the SP12, the DMX 808, the different drum machines that we use. So it was kind of raw. So they were learning on the fly. We knew exactly the sound that we wanted, but it took a lot of hours and a lot of EQing to make sure that we got the sound that we wanted. And then when when you mix it down, it also changed. Because we were used to live performances. So that's a picture of us from when we took pictures for punk rock rap. So that was the influence. That's the movie from the movie Wow. So, but the engineers weren't familiar. So we were both learning. We were learning how to make records in the studio, and the engineers was learning how to get the sound that we desired and mastering and mixing. But we honestly, I could tell you this: we did not like making records. That was not our thing. Records were not the thing that we were into. We were into just performing live on stage. And one of the things that I just want to bring up, growing up in the Bronx, when you woke up on Saturday morning, the bongos was rocking the entire day from 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning to 6 or 7 o'clock at night. So that was part of the culture. And I've noticed that when I go around the world, if I've gone places, like all the people who had influence in any type of music in a major way are from the Bronx. No, I'm serious. I was in Florida.
I can't dispute that.
I was in Florida in a pizza shop. I was buying a pizza, and the guy, it was just talking Italian dude. Like I was like, "Oh, I'm from the Bronx." He said, "What? I'm from the Bronx." I said, "No, you're not." He said, "I'm from the Bronx." So he talked about Valentine's Avenue and all that. But and the culture. I just noticed that like it had to be something in our water.
That's what I actually had that in my notes. Was it in the water?
It's not in the water, because if you look at all the music and stuff like that. So I just want to say this: when hip hop went into making records, a lot of the artists and the musicians did not like hip hop, right? Because they felt that it was not considered music, but they never really dove into the hip hop artists' lifestyle and who they were. Like a lot of us, we played instruments, but the instruments became different for us because we listened to Donna Summers, Elton John, Billy and the Jets in the 70s, Billy and the Jets, and the Bee Gees and all that. And it was good music, but we was like not connected. But going into making new records, it took us a little while to master that. And like later on records that came out like in the 80, 83 and 84 were more kind of, they were much better quality sound mastering and producing. Like when we did our Fresh While Flying Bold, that was really kind of what we got into. And also we also went from doing all the five boroughs to playing in Barnes International, playing in the Roxy, playing in Demararas, playing in the Grill and places like that downtown. So that's where the mess came in, and we got a little bit of that punk rock influence. And we just took it from there. Like, so hip hop we kind of incorporated every type of music in what we did, and we made it happen.
My question, I just marveled listening to punk rock rap and some of your other songs. How I want to know. I just was wondering, how did you do this in the studio? Were you all in the in the studio at the same time? Were you isolated so you could each do your part, or
we were in?
Paint that picture for me.
Right. So we like to have that live feel. So we had the 4 microphones for the MCs inside, because we came from performing. We did it reverse. We learned how to perform live first, then we learned how to make a record. So we wanted to get that feel inside the studio. So punk rock rap,
and you did. You captured it. It was
up tempo, like punk rock, like and it changed the way that people kind of connected to the culture. They thought just hip hop was just like hard beats. Like James Brown played a major part in the hip hop culture. Right?
Oh yeah,
we played James Brown everything.
Well, his
and
drummer,
like so I'm listening to Jon talk about Aerosmith and so people like that. We played those records, and we played those records all the time. We just didn't play the singing part. We played the beats. So hip hop, the hip hop culture incorporated every genre of music to make records. Now, remember, they weren't sampling at the time. We didn't sample. The people who made records at the beginning, we didn't sample. Sampling came in later in the 86, 87, 88, where there were no sampling laws, and artists would sample a song and not pay the originator. And we did play in what's the lady? You said Blue Lady, where the Ladies' Day, or it's a studio down on West 4th Street. We did some songs with CNC Music Factory down there.
Electric Lady.
Thank you.
Electric Lady, yeah. What I'm curious about, did you create the tracks beforehand, your beats beforehand, and then do your vocals over it, or were people playing in the same room live with you? How was the actual session set up?
So the session was set up. We would lay the beat would be laid down first, right? We already had the rhyme. The rhyme was already written. We knew punk, rock, rap. You can do it, and so can you. And then we had Ray Serrato. He played get up. So we had live instruments. Remember, we weren't sampling at the time. We were using live musicians.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. So was that at the same time? How did the session proceed?
Same time. Everything was going at the same time. We were
that.
So it's like the engineers never left the studio.
Yeah.
Like they spent their life in the studio. When we started making records, we spent most of our life in the studio, and we stood there all day, 5 days, 7 days a week. We didn't know that we was paying for it.
We learned that afterwards.
We learned that afterwards when we got the bill. We said, "Oh, you pay for everything." So we learned the business of music when we learned how to make records.
A lot of us do.
We learn about publishing, writers' royalties, and those things that that are really intricate to like the artists and also the producers. Like we had some good. Larry Smith was one major hip hop producer. Larry Smith. He produced a lot of tracks for a lot of different people. D&D Music Studio, which is on like 30-something Street. We played in there. But like the highlight of what we did was playing at the Roxy, where we hung out. Well, we hung out together with Nona Hendrix, Bianca Jagger, what's her name? Madonna, before she was Madonna the world knows now. So we got an opportunity to meet a lot to integrate the culture with what's happening downtown. It bursted on the scene. And then when we did the movie Wild Style, and it took hip hop globally and introduced it to the world. And so that was the fun of hip hop, and we had our own style. We would take
definitely.
We would take this, take that, and make it our own. And I want to say this also. A lot of the bands were not friendly back in the 80s. It was like, who are you, and what the hell are you doing? They didn't show love to us, and we didn't care because we were young, right? We rebels. We don't care. We don't care if you don't show us love. But when we get on stage, after we finish rocking, you're gonna be like, "Oh, that's something different," and we showed that. So now it's a little different. Like they incorporate the live, and they go back to the origin of the music and bring them in. Like again, I always go back to this: when Run and Run DMC and Aerosmith collaborated for Walk This Way. Remember,
Mm.
they didn't want to do that. They didn't want to because they didn't feel that it was something that was prominent. But those of us from the beginning of hip hop understood the collaboration with the beat and the music, and it was like it was a no-brainer. So that propelled it to a different level. And to this day, like most people, don't look at, I would say, rap as an art form. But I mean, it is.
Well, it certainly looked like that more now than ever.
Yeah, I'm talking about the elder, some of the elders that you run into. They're like, "What do you do, that hip hop stuff?" I'm like, no, hip hop is just more than just music. That's right. They don't get it. Like, they think it's just music. I said, you only been introduced. It's like if you only been introduced to one woman in the entire world, you never know how the other women are unless you were introduced to them. So, that's how I look at hip hop. Is you only introduced to rap, then you don't know how the b-boy, you don't know how the graffiti artist or the DJ is, right? So when you introduce it, then you go, oh, I can appreciate that. Like, one of the things we appreciate, the music that we played, we appreciate all the music. And like, we don't get an opportunity to talk to people like Mr. Douglas and Mr. F. Like, they played, and yourself, a major role behind the scenes in pop culture and also the music that we use to do hip hop.
Right.
Like, right. And I think that this forum is very exciting, but I think that it has to be done live.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. Well, but thank goodness there's recordings. So if you can't see it live, but you've seen it live before, you can play those. Yeah. And I met this really cool woman named Summer McCoy. Are you familiar with her? Yeah. She has started the Mixtape Museum.
Oh, yeah.
Cool.
We were on this archiving panel last Saturday, and she was sharing her presentation was all on mixtapes and the history of mixtapes. She's archiving mixtapes, and it was, she and I just afterwards, we phoned each other up and just gabbed for like 2 hours. And she was talking about how with mixtapes, that's how they got the music out, and they would give them, the culture was to be played in cars. And so all the big drug dealers had their big cars and would drive around with these tapes because they would sell the mixtapes for $1 a minute.
I mean, let me just bring some clarification to that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, she said that was one of the ways the music got out there. I'd never even thought about that.
It was in the Bronx. There were a cab company called OJs.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody rode in the OJ. So the OJ would purchase, we didn't call them mixtapes, we called them cassette tapes at that time. So
cassette tapes.
A little bit more polished now, they call them mixtapes. So we would record our live performances. We had a tape master, his name was Elvis Moreno. He was my friend since 3rd grade. Come, plug into the system, record our live performances. And it was clear because he got it live from in-house, and then he would make copies of it and sell it to everybody. And one of the interesting things I want to add about that, and I do apologize cutting you off, I just got excited.
Oh no, please, I want to know what your thoughts were.
Is that those tapes were sent all over the world. It was sent to Germany, Japan, because we had brothers and sisters that were in the military. So that tape went all over the world. So we had a distribution without having distribution with and we didn't call them mixtapes. They were called cassette tapes, and they were live party jams. But I mean, I understand, like, now in the 220, they have to call it. It went from cassette tapes, and they call it mixtapes now because it's more, it's more.
Well, what were you selling them for?
$20.
She said they were selling them for $100 for 100 minutes, and only the rich people could get them. What were you selling them for?
That's not true on our end. We sold them for $20. We had we could get them at the flea market. So we Tape Master had a place in the flea market up in Bruckner where you can go buy the cassettes. And people would come and buy the cassettes. Occasionally, I used to come in, and because he was my best friend, and come in and sign some of them, whatever. He had his stamp. People will come from New Jersey, come from Long Island, come from Queens, and we sold them for $20. Like $20 is a big deal at that time. So
I think so.
And we didn't sell our tape for 100. Like later on, the mixtape artists like Nipsey Russell and what is it, Master P and them may have sold their cassettes for $100, but not from the foundation. We appreciated the fan as long as, and also the art. So we would never ever put a price like that where our own people couldn't afford it. So that made no sense. That would make no sense on our own.
That'd be interesting. I would love to put you two together, do another panel just on this. Every one of these areas is so rich. We could just go on forever. I want to know if there are any questions from any of our viewers and out there. Roy, what's going on with the chat?
Hello. Chiming in from AES control room here.
Okay.
We're gathering some questions. So far, we have a question that's directed, I would assume, towards Jack because of the one name involved. What was Iggy like? So I assume he's referring to Iggy Pop. So and I have to assume he's talking to Jack.
Yeah.
So
he was very cool. He was also very shy, and for a guy that was a wild on stage, to talk to him, he was just very cool and very quiet. I had to when I did the Dolls reunion album that I produced, I asked Iggy if he would fly up to New York and sing on the record, and he said no, but if you come down to Florida, I'll do it. I'll do it there. So I had to fly down to Florida, and he lives like in a jungle down there, and we got him to come to a local studio near his house and record the vocal. I said to him, Iggy, I'm going to send a limousine to pick you up at your house and bring you over to the studio. And when he got to the studio, the limousine pulled up, and it looked like there was no one in the limo. And then the door opened up, and he had been hiding in the limo. And I said, why? He said, I don't want anyone to see me riding in a limo. It's not my thing. Going back to hip hop, I have to bring up two things. One is that I watched Unique Studio in New York become like a major hip hop play. I was in there working all the time, and they kept expanding because they kept getting more and more hip hop artists in there, because that was a place that the engineers kind of understood what was going on with the whole scene. So Unique was a really
thank you
cool
for the
place.
Shout out. And Angela thanks you also. Angela and Rowie both thank you for the shout out.
Yay.
That was the spot. They knew what they were doing. That was very cool.
Jon, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Saw that all of the myriads of fabulous artists you've worked with. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about when you were working with David Byrne. What was that you were doing, and how was that?
It was very complicated because David really wanted to have representation of the rhythms authentically. He wanted everybody to. So he had a whole slew of musicians on that record.
What record was it?
Ray Momo.
Oh, wow. I love that. Yeah. I was hoping that was the one.
That was the one. And the producer was Steve Lillywhite. And this guy from, this British guy. And Steve was awesome to work with. And I recorded that at Atlantic Studios. I think that was the last session that went on in Studio A before they tore it
What a
down.
beautiful room.
Yeah. And then the rest of it I did at over on 48th Street. What's the name of the studio, Jack, on 48th Street?
Hit Factory.
No.
Right Track.
A&R, Right Track.
Right Track. Right Track. So, and I mixed it at Right Track. And that was pretty amazing. It was the first, one of the first digital mixes in terms of the machine. We mixed it to PCM 1630.
Mhm.
Oh, right.
So, yeah.
Oh, boy.
So, yeah, it was tough. And David really didn't want to get into that. He said because mastering digitally was too expensive, and I kind of talked him into it, and it came out great. I mean, it was
Oh, fantastic
one of
record.
my
Well,
favorite records.
I did some
Wow.
early multi-track, 78 and 79 with the multi-track digital recording.
Which
out at
multi-track?
let's see, the Mitsubishi. This is all pre-CBS stuff,
Yeah.
so I was probably 16-bit if it was 16-bit.
Yeah.
And 3M also had a machine, and this was at on the West Coast, Record Plant, LA.
Right.
And the only thing you couldn't do is there was no way to edit whatsoever.
Well, there was no Pro Tools in those days.
mhm.
No, yeah, this was strictly, you had to get it.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was no editing between two different takes, so it was pretty difficult. But it had a sound, but until it was difficult until the Sonys came along with their 24-bit machines.
Mhm.
Wow, I love those machines, especially the 48 channel.
Yeah, they were wonderful.
Yeah.
But I still preferred analog and Pro Tools.
Yes. So, John, what were some of your favorite studios that you recorded a lot of your Latin music? What were the go-to
Good
classic
Vibrations?
sound?
Good Vibrations, only because of the stable of artists that they had, all the finest artists.
Okay.
Ruben Blades is a very inventive person. Can I tell you a little story about this record of Ruben Blades? It's called Maestra Vida.
Sure.
And we're talking about digital. It, of course, was analog, and Ruben wrote this. It's like an opera, but it was the anthology of a Latin family for about 3 generations, and Carlos Francetti, the great Argentine composer and arranger, did most of the arrangements for it, and it was produced by Willie Colon. And we ended up with some great instrumentations that hadn't been done in Latin music before. For example, three pieces in this 2-record set were classical orientation, and was 16 after the double 16 violins, 4 violas, 2 cello, oboe, bassoon, piano, 2 trumpets, 2 trombones, and this is being done all at one time in the same room, and it was quite an amazing undertaking. And then after the mixes, I ended up with all these pieces that just needed to segue together, but there was no Pro Tools, so we did 3 machine mixing. And you know what that is, Jack?
Yeah, I do.
3 2-tracks,
Yeah.
2 playback machines, and 1 machine to record in, so you can do all the segues and have seamless segues.
Yeah, beautiful crossfades.
Yeah, crossfades. And so
Exactly.
I assembled the whole record, both volumes of the record, with this technique of 3 machine mixing, and it came out great. And the record takes you from classical instrumentation to hardcore salsa, and with the 3 trombones and rhythm section, and then there's even talking talking around a table that is supposed to be taking place in a Spanish bar, in a Latin bar. And I went to a Latin bar and did a remote recording of just the noise in the bar.
The ambience.
Everybody, the ambience, and everybody talking in Spanish, and the cash register ringing up behind, and I had about 2 hours of that stuff that I blended in over the conversations of this family.
You took a Nagra there?
Actually, I think I used, it was a Sony cassette machine, but it was
okay.
TCD, I forget the 5M. And I would have loved to use a Nagra, but where am I going to get one of those?
I just wanted to say something about the 70s in the studios. I was lucky enough to have been a part of we had a jingle business at the record plant. I used to do a lot of jingles, big dates. And all of the guys that are kind of famous as musicians, they all did jingles. So you would be doing a jingle and you'd have the Brecker Brothers, you'd have Tony Levin, you'd have Steve Gadd, you'd have Ronnie Cuba, you'd have Mike Maneri. I mean, just these fabulous musicians on these jingle dates. And
because that's where the money was.
Yeah, that's
absolutely
where the money was. Yeah, but it was
by the
so
second
much fun to see these great players, doing these jingles. Hugh McCracken, David Spinoza, Joe Beck. Just great players. Mike Maneri usually did the arrangements on these things because he had a big production company that did jingles for. And I'm, either Jay Messina and myself would be doing these dates, and we would always be, there would always be in jokes between the musicians and ourselves, and these guys from the agency were always the enemy and the outsiders. So behind their backs, we were always like, "Oh, these guys, man, they have no idea what's going on." I remember one time, one of the clients, maybe somebody from Ford, saying something to Jay, and Jay saying to him, "Did you think you were hiring professionals for this? we're just amateurs." So it's but it was great to watch these. I mean, I did Steve Gadd's first New York date. He was subbing for a guy named Donald McDonald, who was you remember Donald? So he was the guy that you went to for a date, and Donald couldn't make the date, so Steve Gadd came in as his sub, and Steve sat down, and it was just a jingle for milk or potato chips or who knows what, but we're looking at this guy playing, and he's just playing what is on the music on the page. But yet he's doing this work on the hi-hat that is so unexpected.
Yeah.
And everybody in the room is like, who the hell is this guy? He's unbelievable. So after that, we left and we went to Smith's on the corner of 44th and 8th Avenue to have a beer or something. We're sitting in the booth, Jay Messina, Mike Maneri, myself, and Steve Gadd. And Steve looked at us and he said, "Man," he said, "that was tough. I don't think I'll ever make it in this."
Oh, there's a
Why?
quote.
Because he was reading? You had to read?
No, because he was nervous about the whole thing, and he thought he did lousy, and like all
jingle,
of us, he was insecure, and he was new in town. Tony Levin had brought him down from. Tony was on a date. They brought him down from Rochester, and he was the new guy in town.
Wow, that's a tremendous story. So, John, there's a song on one of Ruben Blades' records, Siembra.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because in that, the intro for that is, kind of funk, kind of.
Plastico.
Plastico. Yeah, the song Plastico.
I think the influence there was Salvador Cuevas, the bass player.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of the first guys to do the slap on the bass strings,
Okay.
And that was the intro to the song. This slap bass and American drums in that song. And it was, I mean, Siembra was, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Siembra was the biggest selling record in the history of Latin music. I mean, for example, in Caracas alone, they sold 500,000 records in the first month.
Wow.
Release.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's extraordinary for sure.
Great record. Great record.
Oh yeah. Well, listening to that song, it was, talking about how all these different genres, melded with each other and influenced each other and all of that. And that just seemed, maybe it's because New York is compact relatively compared to, say, LA or whatever, but there's cross-pollination was hard to resist, I would think. And everybody got to influence everybody. It was more, feels like it was just the creative attitude and the creative energy. And what were some of the elements that you think influenced that? Was because New York was broke and it was affordable to live there, and so all sorts of creatives could be there? What do you think?
That's what brought John Lennon to New York in the very early 70s, was that Yoko knew the art scene there, and John wanted to get involved in all elements of New York, and he thought that was the place to be.
Cool.
So it's that's a fine example. I mean, not to mention that a lot of the British rock stars at the time, I mean, Mick Jagger was living across the street on 72nd Street, across the street from the Dakota.
Wow.
Guys, I mean, all these guys were all hanging around in New York. It was where David Bowie had an apartment in New York. Everybody was here. It was where you could go out on the street, and if you walked by a bodega, you heard some great music. It was everywhere. There was music. There was music in the subways. You didn't need a permit then to do it. So there was a mix, and we all absorbed it like sponges. I just wanted to talk a little bit about Walk This Way and the attitude of the street, for example. Walk This Way was a song we were going to throw away because we couldn't come up with a lyric or even a rhythm. The track was complete, but we couldn't figure anything out for that song. And so we had
lyrically?
Yeah, lyrically or melody or any of it. I mean, It was just like, it was a good riff, but we couldn't come up with anything for it. And so what we used to do when we needed lyrics, because we were on the corner of 44th and 8th Avenue, and this is mid-70s, what we used to do is Stephen and I would take a walk, Stephen Thomas, we'd take a walk out onto 8th Avenue, which was hookers and pimps and drug dealers and Johns and junkies and everything. And some tourists and massage parlors. So we would take a walk up 8th Avenue, and we would get lyrics right off the street, because the stuff that people were talking about on the street was the stuff little phrases that we could use in a lyric. And we would walk up to about 52nd Street and then back down Broadway, down 42nd Street, all of it rich with lyric and with vibe. And then back to the studio. By the time they got back to the studio, we would have some real treasures that we could put into a song. The day that we decided to take a walk to get Walk This Way lyrics was a Sunday afternoon. And we in fact, the 8th Avenue was called Minnesota Strip because the hookers were all from Minneapolis. But anyway, I don't know, they got off the bus and there they went. But so we walked up 8th Avenue. There was nobody. They must have all been in church. It was quiet.
Oh yeah.
We then back down Broadway, quiet. Nobody out. And we walked down 42nd Street, and there were all these like theaters that played second times around. They play these movies. And and Young Frankenstein was playing. And so, no, it's the whole band now on this trip. We decided we'd all go for the walk. And
oh, it froze.
He froze.
It froze.
Yeah,
Roy?
Jack's camera is frozen.
Yeah. Oh no. Can you?
Okay. Well, he would have to reload. He doesn't realize he's disconnected yet.
Let me. I can text him.
It's a great pose.
We'll pick it up from when the band was taking a walk. Oh, there he is.
Oh,
There
Jack.
you are.
Let's
Okay.
pick it up. Let's pick it up from when you were telling us about the band taking a walk.
Yeah, so the whole band.
Audio.
You got to unmute your mic. Sorry.
Unmute
Your mic is muted.
we take the walk. No one's out. It's a Sunday afternoon. The whole band is walking around. We walk up. We go the regular route. We walk down 42nd Street, and at a second-run theater, the movie Young Frankenstein is playing. So we all go in. We sit down, and we're watching Young Frankenstein. And there's a scene where the hunchback lets everybody in the door, and he goes, "Walk this way." And he walks like a hunchback, and everybody follows him walking the same way. And we died. We were all laughing so hard. Well, this is the funniest thing. Movie was over. We go back to the studio. We put up the track again, and I start walking around the studio like the hunchback. I'm going, walk this way. Walk this way. Steven looks at me and says, "I got it." He left, came back in 45 minutes, and then history was made.
Oh my gosh.
And so,
wow.
Yeah, that's where we got Walk This Way from.
Mel Brooks is on the phone.
Yeah, we always wanted to tell Mel about that, but Steven said, "He'll sue us, we'll lose every penny." But
Oh, wow.
I don't think that would happen, but that's where it came from. And the rhythm that Steven came up with, the syncopation, was really a bit of a lift from what rappers were doing up in the Bronx. So that's where he was coming. First, he was a big Ella Fitzgerald fan. So he loved, that kind of thing happening. And then he just tied it into a chorus that walked this way. Bless you. So a little mid-70s history about the streets and where the song came from.
That's fantastic. What an incredible story. One of my favorites now, for sure. Oh, gosh. Well, did any of you work on any disco? I did one. Oh, crickets. Crickets. Well,
I hung out at 54 because I had a client that I used to let in to record for free. His name was something Barkley. I can't remember his name, but he was a doorman at Studio 54, and I gave him free time to come in and do vocals. And so, because of that, I walked right through that door every night. I went to Studio 54 because I had that connection.
You gave him studio time.
Lynn Barkley was his name.
Lynn Barkley.
Free studio time at record plant. And the payoff was into Studio 54 any and every night I ever wanted to, bringing as many people as I wanted. And that was a scene.
Yeah.
I mean, that was incredible. The amount of sex that I had in the balcony was the amount of coke I did in the back room. I mean, I don't know how I ever got to sleep.
Yeah.
It was insane. It was truly insane, but it was a scene.
Oh yeah, and just monumentally New York more than anywhere else. The record I did was called Too Hot for Love, spelled TWO, hot for love, and it started out on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock, everything for Butterfly Records. I don't know if they exist anymore right now. But it was the A-list of all session players. It was Jeff Porcaro on drums, David, oh God, my brain, keyboard player, famous,
Richard T.
Canadian producer.
Bob
David
Foster.
David Foster, of course. He played keyboards on it. Steve Lukather was on a guitar. And we did this 7-minute song called Too Hot for Love, Too Hot for Love. And it's recorded to tape. And those guys got all paid cash under the table. Saturday morning it started. And then poor Steve Porcaro had to do a kick drum track solo, 7 minutes.
4 on the floor.
4 on the floor. And he did it perfectly. That was before, anything else. He truly was a metronome. And his poor foot he could hardly walk after that. But then they looped it, turned it into 22 minutes. We worked John Stronach was the engineer. There was more cocaine doing that nobody shared with the lowly assistant engineer. But I got to clean out their vials and do that for them to keep them going. But back then the studios would give the assistants time release speed to keep us going when
Blackbirds.
nobody. Yeah, well, it was Desoxin or Dexamil or something. Anyway, that's to keep us up and going. And that record was started on Saturday morning and went to Monday morning.
Wow.
We didn't leave.
No.
And we did the whole thing, and it was just brutal. It was absolutely brutal. But one of those weekend sessions where, they want to book the studio on the weekend, so they'll put in anybody.
I produced one song that was considered somewhat disco. It was Yoko's Walking on Thin Ice. Got a lot of play in the discos, which was basically a loop that John and I made from the Double Fantasy sessions. And then John and I played all the instruments over the loop, over the drum loop.
Well, easy. What was your take on this between hip hop and disco? I mean, it's dance music. It's combinations.
When the hip hop was being created, a lot of hip hop we may have listened to it individually, but we didn't play disco. Like that wasn't our type of music that we played. Like like in reverse. Let's go in reverse. At the beginning, disco was prominent. So
at the beginning, so disco was already big before hip hop.
Absolutely, and then they should give hip hop DJ 20 minutes in the disco set, just to play beats and stuff like that. And then everybody would get off the floor and and go get high or drink or whatever they do. And then it went reverse, where because a lot of the hip hop artists, we had disco DJs. A lot of them named disco so and so, disco so and so. So then it reversed where it was just hip hop and there was no disco played at all. I mean, one of my favorite artists, of course, is Donna Summers. I mean, she was the most, to me at the time, she was the most beautiful woman I've ever seen on an album cover in my entire life. And her songs were incredible. Like her voice was incredible. I love Donna Summers. And then it was, of course, the Bee Gees. Like who didn't play the Bee Gees? Like we all knew the Bee Gees songs, and they were played on every station all day, every day. So that was it. But we didn't connect like in that way in disco. Like disco was something we would look at like our older brothers or sisters' music, and we didn't really like. we didn't want to be connected to our older brother and sister.
Yeah.
We do our own thing.
Disco was prominent in Brooklyn.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's where the discos were really happening. You know, it's like,
I mean, you know, skating rings was a big deal back then. Right? Skating rings were big, so they played a lot of disco.
Oh, right, of course, yeah.
Right. The skating rings were big, and like I didn't go to Studio 54 because of course I was too young. Number one, number two, I went to Barnes International, so that was like 1981, 1982. And it looked like it was like a football field. And then like in the Roxy, like they got high in the Roxy too, but I didn't do drugs. So I was like, what's going on? Like they would bring out trays of cocaine in the VIP section and just put that down. And I was like, all right, what's that? It's like, yo, that's cocaine. I was like, what do you do with that? I said, you sniff it, and then what happens? Then you get high, you feel good. I said, then what? And then you do whatever you want to do. I was like, okay, great. So if everybody's doing that, I do not want to do that. So I'm one of the few pioneers of hip hop who never ever consumed drugs, alcohol, or any kind of consumption. I was high off the rhythm. I was high off the energy. I was high off the performance. I was high off the music.
Good for
and
you.
I will say you still are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it paid off.
It helps. But I mean, you know, like a lot of, you know, you kind of think like you talk to different artists and you think like they tell you like, I need to take drugs to get into my creative mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've got a lot of my peers who said I needed, you know, I took drugs to get in my creative mind. And I couldn't connect to that because I get in creative mind when I hear a beat. Mm-hmm. Like my mind starts like a rhythm, like I can easily like come up with a chorus or come up with a hook when I hear a beat. And the beat drives the soul, and the soul drives the subconscious, the subconscious drives the conscious. So that inspired me like that. And plus, like, you know, when you're an artist, like he was talking about the girls, the ladies, like I have 7 sisters, so I had to respect the ladies. I had a lot of ladies, but I respect the ladies because I grew up with 7 sisters, so I had a different kind of concept about women, but I still had, you know, multiple. When you're growing up, you're 18. Listen, when you're 17, you're 18, you're 19, you don't know nothing about love. You know, you only know about engagement and physical contact and, you know, and things like that. So the music allowed you to, music keeps you young.
Yes.
Number one, inside your vibration, your heart and your mind. Like I tell people, like people ask you, like, how old are you? I say, well, I'm 60. They go, really? I say, yeah. Well,
Wow.
I'm close
Really?
to that. I'm close to that. I'm close because I was born in 1963. So a few more years, I'll be 60 years old, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people go, it's impossible. I say, no, it's just like, it's like some people are young inside and outside. And some people are just young, their spirit. Like, I don't feel like I'm talking now about once I see myself speaking, it doesn't feel like it's me because I see I'm like a 9-year-old kid every day. Like I'm excited to wake up. I'm excited to like create new music. Like people get caught up in a time. Like my thing is like you make music to make music. You don't make music for a time.
Yeah.
That's period.
Yeah.
It happens to be put in a capsule at that time because, you know, it's made in that era. But, you know, making music, you're making music. Like, I mean, I learned like so much today from the engineer side because, you know, the engineers, you have to pay the engineers to be there.
That's our hope. That's the plan.
we did some track at Unique Studios, of course. A couple of our songs were done at Unique, of course, because I still have the printout. But you know, you didn't know, like no one knew, like we didn't know like the intricacy that goes into an engineer, right? You don't know that, right? When you're an artist, you just ask them, press that, turn that up, move that over there, bring that up, bring that back, rewind that back, add that in, do that. Not understanding like there's a science behind everything that's being done in the studio, and from the artist perspective, from the musician perspective, and from the engineer perspective. And now when you get older, you have a great appreciation for the things that you've done and the things you're about to do.
Yep. Cool. Wow. This has just been absolutely wonderful. I've had the best time.
We're doing great here. We usually do end around now, but we do have a few questions. So
Oh,
It's up
okay,
to you
great.
guys. If you're game for some short questions, we'll try to get some perspective. This is maybe to everybody relating to the art scene in New York. If you have any experience from involving any of the things that were going on in the art scene and how they related to music, or just any other story that might be related somehow to the art scene. We have a few other questions, but that's one of them.
Wowie.
I mean, the hip hop art scene was the trains, right? So every day an artist will go down into a train yard, whether it's number 2 train, number 3 train, number 4 train, 5 train, and paint their artistry on our trains. So they made our trains beautiful in New York City. So that was the art scene for the hip hop culture. The trains being going from barrel to barrel with their masterpiece on it, whether it was a Campbell's soup can, whether it was Mickey Mouse, whether it was a bear, whether it was like the letters being like you couldn't read it unless you were like it looked like what's it called,
Wild
like,
style.
Wild style, exactly. But the interesting thing about the artists, that they did that a lot of them did it in the dark.
Oh, of course. They had to sneak in there and not get arrested. There's a fabulous documentary, I think it's on Netflix, all about that. I encourage everybody to see it. But exactly what you're talking about, Easy.
I was like, I wasn't doing the aerosol can thing because that was a little bit too much for me. But I know a lot of people who've done it. Like one of my best friends is Phase 2, and Alani Green, and he was an incredible writer. Like we kind of kind of minimize like the contributions of that art form. Aerial can spray, that's incredible. How do you do that in the dark? And then like it goes borough wide and you're sitting there and you're watching it go by, and it's like it's incredible. Then it went from there and it went to canvas, where people were paying $15,000 and $30,000 for Ventura, Dondi, and those guys their pieces. It's incredible. And talking about that, Blondie
Banksy.
Huh?
And now Banksy.
Right,
Banksy.
Blondie and Fat Five Freddy came to the PAL. It was 1979. That was the first hip hop MC convention, and that's where we initially met them.
Very cool. Wow. See that documentary. It's fantastic.
In the vein of the Campbell soup cans that were on the train, Jack, did you ever visit Warhol's factory?
I did. I knew Andy. He he came by the studio quite a bit. I knew a bunch of people that were part of that whole scene.
Well, you were talking about why Yoko Ono encouraged John or inspired him. They wanted to come to New York because of her connection with the art scene. I mean, she was an artist.
Yeah, and Andy and Yoko were close friends, and I also had produced Allen Ginsberg and was part of to be part of that scene, which was all mixed with the poetry and Patty and Burroughs, and I was part of that whole scene downtown.
Very cool. And again, about art, is there anything, John, anything art-wise that stands out for you from your studio career?
Nothing other than the artist making.
Sure, the art form of music.
Music, yeah. I mean,
cool.
One second, Jack. As an engineer, I led a very sheltered life because of the hours I was working. I mean, I was in the studio, 18 hours a day on a regular day. So I didn't really come in contact with much else.
When we were doing Double Fantasy, John himself was quite an artist, and every day he would do a really amazing sketch and then put it up on the wall. At one point, the whole wall was around the glass was covered with John's sketches, and they were going to take them down, and John just said, "Anybody want these?"
Oh gosh.
Everybody
gosh.
got a couple of really cool
Oh
Jon
my
sketches.
gosh.
I mean, just beautiful things, you know.
Yeah, he was so good with those line drawing.
Yeah,
and
yeah, very simple, like you know,
But-
early Picasso, a few lines, and it said everything.
just captured so well.
Yeah,
I think there's a book, a collection that Yoko put out. Maybe
It's those-
she took those all down and,
Oh, no, she did.
published it.
yeah,
Yeah.
she did. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
they were very good. Any questions from out in the Ethernet out there?
Yeah, that's where we're getting these from. And so here's the next one. This one is from Jean Montalvo, one of our fellow AES section
Hey,
officers.
Jean. Yeah.
And Jeannie. And she's asking, maybe each of you could give us a short favorite moment of during your trajectory of your career in New York.
Who wants to go first?
Really open to any of you.
I would say my entire career is my favorite moment.
Amen.
If that makes any sense. I mean, making music, recording music, that's my life.
An ongoing moment. of
It's like
enjoyment.
children. Which one's your favorite child?
Right.
you know.
No, I think she's just looking for any standout story in the trajectory of your career that warms your heart as a favorite memory.
My favorite memory is like performing on a stage and a girl's running up and you kiss them and they faint. I was like, really? I was like, oh my God! Like this is what it is. Like I was in the moment, but I was kind of flabbergasted. Like people really faint for being kissed. Like I didn't understand the power of music and the power of what it does to people. Like the vibration of it. Like that was the power of the music, and also so that was like a moment where you had that power to make someone lose their control of themselves and fall out. I really was like, oh my goodness, like this is fun. Oh my God. So I did that a couple of times. And also being chased. Like, so say when you come into a venue and you walk through the door and then all of a sudden they turn around and they go, oh my God, it's so-and-so, and just have them pulling your hair, trying to rip your clothes off. Like that to me was like exciting. Like, oh my God, like what? I mean, what could more you ask for? People like, and that's some of the most moving moments.
It's interesting because some of the artists I've worked with had that experience and they were completely terrified by it.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
I mean, listen, I play basketball really well too. So I love the audience. I love the excitement. I love the attention. So that was just part of the package. Like I didn't have a problem with that. Like just don't kill me. I mean, I got my hair pulled out many times. My clothes ripped, but I mean, you can go get it sewn back up.
Goes with the territory.
It was exciting. So I didn't find it evasive. I find it gave me more energy. Like it made you want to do it more when you get on stage to bring out that excitement in the people that came to see you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anybody else on that one?
I've got a fun memory.
Go.
Please.
This is from the Asia album with Steely Dan, and I admit,
I've heard that one.
Yeah, as if anybody's seen Donald and Walter, they aren't quite the sex symbols that some people would think. And I have to say though, being an assistant engineer back in those days, and it was at the Village Studios, great music came through there, great artists came through there, a lot of really handsome people, a lot of opportunities that I knew never to, excuse this, but I knew never to piss in the pot I ate out of. I knew if I wanted to be the woman engineer I wanted to be, I would never date anybody. That said, sometimes there was a little like, oh boy, never took action on any of that. However, being the assistant on the Asia album, I admit I had an artist crush on Donald Fagen.
Okay.
And just because he was so magnificent to watch when he performed in the control room, when I knew we would be doing sync overdubs in the control room, I just couldn't wait to get to work just to experience him playing. And I remember so distinctly on the song Asia itself, we'd already done the sax solo with Wayne Shorter, which was, of course, iconic. That was an amazing day. But for some reason, having Donald's ARP Odyssey set up on the little console on the side of the little wooden, bench on the side of the console, just plugged in with a direct box and sitting there to the side and hearing the outro with Steve Gadd playing the drums like that and and he was adding the layers and layers and layers of sync there. And for some reason, it just hit me like an epiphany, goosebumps, just how he was a hunchback. He had buck teeth. He was pigeon-toed. He was, none of these things, not, no social interaction, no small talk or anything in those sessions. But I was just mesmerized watching him perform that. So every time I hear Asia, there's so many great memories just from the recording of that song alone, let alone the whole album. That particular time, I just remember looking up at him and his head's back and his teeth are bared, and he's just doing these pads and layering these things, and it was absolutely magical. I just went.
He was exotic.
This is why we do this.
All about character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, he was exotic to you. I mean, he's exotic.
Yeah. I mean, there's, we can all claim an artist crush on somebody at some point. Not that, I guess it's a major appreciation, but it goes deeper, or it's also, quite often, the relationships we have with the artists that we're working with is like a marriage. Is for that moment where you're creating a child of some sort, and that interaction and creation stimulates a lot of things that some people can confuse them with, we're going to go somewhere else with this. But just appreciating each other on that deeper level and that artistry, and respecting the fact that you get to be a part of this magic is, boy, best drug in the world, I think.
I had very similar feelings about Patti Smith when I was producing her.
Oh yeah, I bet.
It wasn't the most beautiful and beautiful woman in the world, but was magnetic. But for me, that moment in my life was in the mid '60s, 1965. I took a tramp steamer, went to Liverpool. Was told that I, wouldn't be allowed to leave the ship. Had my guitar, my amp. Because I came over, I said I wanted to work. I didn't have a work permit. When the ship leaves, you're on it. And I escaped from the ship, and I was in the front pages of the Liverpool newspapers, pictures of me with and London papers. It was a big deal that this young American musician had come over to Liverpool, was trying to break into the scene, and was, eventually I got deported and changed. But anyway, the week that I arrived in Liverpool, the Beatles released Rubber Soul. And while I had escaped from the ship, I bought the album and played it in the playing booth in the record store. And I went crazy off it. Now, let's go many years later. I'm assigned to work on the Imagine album. And my assignment is to, and I'm, a tremendous Beatle fan. And my gig is that I'm going to be in another room, and I'm doing transfers to multi-track and doing some editing. That was my gig on the Imagine album. I was going to be engineering. I was going to be transferring and editing. And about 3 or 4 days into the project, John Lennon walked into my little room where I was working, because he was just looking for an open door to walk in to get some just to get away from the madness that was Phil Spector. And he came in, and I almost peed in my pants when he came in the room, because there was John Lennon standing in the little room. He said, okay if I come in here? And I said, yeah, sure. And he sat down on a couch, was on the other side of a console, and put his feet up on the glass. And all I saw was cigarette smoke and his sneakers. And after a few minutes, I explained to him, I'm the guy doing your edits and your transfer. Oh, I think you're doing a great job. After a few minutes, I said to him, I've been to Liverpool. And his head popped up and he said, so why would you ever, where are you from? I said, New York, born and raised. Why would you ever want to go to Liverpool? It's a terrible place, dirty, and everybody there wants to come here. And I said, well, I was a musician and I wanted to, swim in the Mersey and soak in the scene there. Oh, he said, how'd that work out? I said, good and bad. I said, bad, I got deported, but good, I made a lot of noise before I was deported. And he looked at me and he said, are you the crazy Yank that was in all the newspapers? And I said, yeah, that was me. He said, I can't believe I'm meeting you. This is unbelievable. This is like something written in the stars here we laugh so hard about you and your adventure. And he asked me, and the picture in the newspaper on the front page of the biggest newspaper in Liverpool, I've got my 55 Les Paul and I'm playing it, and there I am. And he asked me if I still had the guitar. And I said, no. And then he said, why aren't you working with us on this record? I said, well, I don't know. He said, well, you are now. And he brought me down to the studio, and that moment changed my life completely.
Wow. Just for you speaking up. I mean, so many things, that the fact that he walked into your room just to get away, the fact that you mentioned you'd been to Liverpool.
The fact that I got on a tin can and crossed the North Atlantic in the middle of winter.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Did you ever know the payoff from that? That's the payoff. Know.
That's why I tell people all the time.
That you never know where life takes you.
That's right.
That's fantastic.
Amazing.
Another.
So we do have one or two more quick questions. We want to try and abuse you guys and make this a little bit longer. Bill Fuller was asking a question. I'll try and shorten a little bit. Do you think it was easier for an up-and-coming singer-songwriter in the 70s to get developed and signed? Do you ever see a talented artist that you then try to produce, record, develop, and then help them get a deal? If it was easier then or now, and why? I don't know if that's something we can cover quickly, but it's that was the question from Bill Muller.
It was very difficult then, more difficult now. But there are so many more ways to get your music out there now that you don't need the major label. However, I started a label, and I've been signing artists. Unfortunately, I can't take them into the studio right now because of this. But I love finding artists that
Mm-hmm.
Lenise, I'm building that studio.
Oh yeah, I know. I can't wait. I'm kicking in.
Yeah, it's about done, but I can't fly out there.
Soon it'll be over.
Yeah,
eventually it'll be over, and
and I'll be out there, and all my artists are all got their, they're ready to go, and I am, and they all got their advances, so they're not going anywhere, and their contracts are signed. But it was hard back then. It's always been hard because you could sign, an A&R man could romance you, and a week later he was fired. So it was always difficult. It is much better now because you can do it all yourself, and I love the fact that everybody is.
I would say the artist can build it. It's about brands now, so the artists build a brand, and then they can have kind of much more of a say on what happens in their deal. Like they have 100% of their publishing writers, things like that. I think it's an artist's field, but it's oversaturated. But the artist has a greater opportunity now to build a brand prior to being kind of, I would say, taken by the record industry. and they have a lot more power. It takes a longer time, but the payoff is greater as an artist to build your brand, versus signing with if you feel like you don't have the time or the talent to sign with someone and not build your brand. It's easier said than done, but if you're good, and your quality, it doesn't make a difference. People will recognize you.
Yeah.
You can build your brand. So it's about building brands now versus the company. I think back in the 70s, it's harder to sign, but the company would build you. Like they're like, they had the machine to work for you. Radio stations, tours. Now you can build a brand on the internet and do it that way.
I mentioned, I haven't mentioned, Jimmy Iovine used to be my assistant. And I remember Jimmy calling me up and saying to me, guess what I'm doing? He was in LA. He'd been working at A&M. He said, I'm starting a label and I'm signing hip hop bands. And I'm like, Jimmy, you're signing hip hop bands? That's really interesting. He goes, no, man. He says, you have no idea. He said, it's going to be so big. You're not going to believe it. So
it is.
And Jimmy.
Jimmy Iovine. Yeah. So that's interesting. Like you're touched, like you're touched in many different facets of the world. I mean, and that's great. I mean, to have that connection, like it's ever ending. Like music is ever ending.
Yeah, it isn't that we reach out in so many places, and we have so many great connections to people in every way. How they're by the music we create, and that's the most important thing, actually.
Yep. Well, just the interaction and being present, just like what you're saying, EC's the brand. And right now it's the Wild West. I just put out shameless promotion, an all analog recording for a band called Primal Kings, totally independent. We paid for this all ourselves. No D-word digital on this entire record. It's recorded to 2-inch mixed to 1/2-inch, and Ron McMaster cut the vinyl over at Capitol. So that's an all analog AAA legacy quality.
What kind of music
vinyl. Sorry?
Is it rock?
Primal Kings. It's rock, blues, roots, guitar, perfect music for tape and vinyl.
Recorded with the whole band in the room at the same
absolutely.
time?
Absolutely. No, I'm just inspired and captured. That's what I did. One take wonder singer, real singer, real guitars. I'm so proud of this record. We all had a blast, and you can hear it on the record. And of course we digitized it, and Warren Sokol over at United did that. And so you go to the Primal Kings website and go to album, you can hear the whole album.
Cool.
But if you but this is for sale on their site.
The vinyl is.
Yeah. We only got this like a few weeks ago. The actual manufacturing took forever.
Because
of the pandemic,
vinyl, and because of the fire.
Yeah, the Apollo fire. I mean, all these things happened. Yet, ta-da! There it is. So we got the first limited run. Now, what do we do with it? It's monetizing.
Pass it to me.
Yeah. Right. Here. Sell this record. Sell this record.
Look forward to hearing it.
Thank you.
I got to go. What's the last question?
All right, last question. I believe this one is for Jon Fausty. It's from Tom Cadley. John, how did you get in Kirsty McNichol's Electric Ladyland? Walking Down Madison is one of his favorite songs. How did you get involved with that?
Steve Lillywhite, the producer, and her husband at the time, asked me to work on that record, Electric Ladyland. I'm sorry, Electric Landlady was the name of the record. And we recorded at Electric Lady.
That's great.
Oh, wow.
Very cool.
I'll have to check that.
Electric Landlady.
Oh, right, why did that take so long to come up?
On behalf of the entire AES New York Section Committee and the membership, we want to thank everybody. It was a great panel. We really appreciate your time. Amazing insight and stories. Lanice, great job moderating.
Thank you so
for
much.
sharing with all of us, everybody. Everyone. We really appreciate it. And let's see each other IRL, as they say, in the real life.
Yeah.
Guys, hang in the room for 1 second. We're going to end the stream. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here.